It's common in fandoms for the general consensus to be taken as fact. Mario fans all agree. Luigi is the sexier brother. Anyone who says otherwise calls it a hot take, and everyone else either says they're rage baiting or falls for the rage bait themselves. With how dominating this consensus can be, it's always interesting to see it change over time, like with the Star Wars prequels and 3D Sonic games. Pokémon fans do this all the time, whether it be subtle mechanics or entire games, but the most common is with the Pokémon themselves. Sometimes a cool Pokémon gets too prominent. Sometimes an underappreciated Pokémon finds itself in the spotlight. Sometimes someone online ruins it for everyone else. Recently, 3 infamous Pokémon have begun to get more love from the fanbase. The trio of Klink, Vanillite, and Trubbish, as well as their evolutions. When these 3 debuted in the 5th generation of Pokémon, many fans singled them out as everything wrong with Pokémon nowadays. These designs were so lazy, so unoriginal, so bad that the series must be going downhill. Well, 12 years later, the kids who started playing Pokémon with these games have grown up, and now it's much more common to see fans who love these designs. And because many of them remember the backlash these Pokémon got on release, they can be a bit defensive when they hear criticism. They claim that these designs are not any worse than designs from previous Pokémon games, and that they were not worth discarding an otherwise excellent generation over. And I think they're right. So then, I should like these Pokémon, shouldn't I?
Everybody hates me!
No, little dude, honest.
Hold on, I hate him.
Yeah, I still have issues with these lines. I'm going to go through each of them individually and say what I think doesn't work in their designs and how they could have been improved. There's a couple of points for each line, but the overarching theme is missed potential. Each of these could have been really amazing, but didn't do enough to let that promise shine. Let me start by providing an example to show you where I'm coming from. I really like Pyroar. This is a pretty uncommon opinion from what I've seen online. People either don't like Pyroar or are incredibly neutral towards it. But I like it. Lions are cool, and Pyroar has all the cool parts of a lion in that familiar Pokemon style. Does this mean that Pyroar is a well-designed Pokemon? No. Believe it or not, you can like things that suck. I mean, you like Pokemon games, don't you? And boy does Pyroar suck. My fondness for Pyroar does not excuse the fact that it's really just a lion in the Pokemon art style. The gender dimorphism is neat, but that feels kinda mandatory for a lion Pokemon. It's a fire type, but that's barely part of the design. They could have given it a mane of fire, but it just looks like Lysander halfway through morphing into a lion. Really, the only new feature is the streaks in their manes. Now, some extreme weeaboos in the audience, or habitual Bulbapedia browsers like myself, may notice the streaks in the male Pyroar's mane vaguely resembles the kanji for fire. Kind of. But really, it more closely resembles the Daimonji, a giant bonfire lit during the annual Gozan no Okuribi festival in Japan. This festival marks the time when deceased family members visit the living world, and the Daimonji is lit to signify them returning to the spirit world. Well now, that's a cool piece of trivia, right? Doesn't that little Easter egg give you more of an appreciation for Pyroar? Frankly, no, it shouldn't. As a Pyroar fan, I don't like Pyroar for referencing this festival, I like it for being a lion. In fact, this trivia makes me disappointed we didn't see the festival more incorporated in Pyroar's design. Like, it's a festival where your dead ancestors come to visit you. Lions are social animals. How cool would it have been if Pyroar summoned a pride of ghost lions to fight alongside it? If that's too extreme for an early route Pokemon, it could have helped guide spirits to the afterlife, like a less terrifying Dusknoir. People joke about their cat staring into the corner looking for ghosts. I think this makes sense. You could even keep its unique fire normal typing. It's not dead itself, so ghost doesn't make sense for it. And because normal is immune to ghost, you could say it's more adept at channeling spirits or something. I don't know. Maybe the streaks really are just referencing the fire kanji, or they mean nothing and just coincidentally look like the Daimonji. But this connection, intentional or not, just screams missed potential. This is what Pyroar could have been, and all we got was a warm lion. All of this is to say, Pyroar is not a good or interesting Pokemon design. My fondness for Pyroar does not change the fact that it's bad, and more importantly, the fact that it's bad does not change the fact that I like it. This is the mindset I hope fans of Klink, Vanillite, and Trubbish can have as I go through my criticisms of these Pokemon. I don't hate these designs for being made of trash or being particularly worse than what came before. I just think they fail to live up to their potential. I'm not here to tell you that you are wrong for liking these designs. I'm not here to make fun of you for liking these designs. This is a safe space for fans of bad Pokemon designs, because I also like bad Pokemon designs. Sorry for such a long preamble, but I felt it was important we started off on the right foot here. To the fans of Klink, Vanillite, and Trubbish, know that I'm not trying to convince you to stop liking these Pokemon. I'm just trying to explain why I feel let down by them. You can make it to the end of this video and still feel the same about these designs. In fact, I hope you do. Even if I say these reasons for liking these Pokemon don't make sense, you can still have your own. I just argue they're subjective reasons, and other fans like myself don't have to agree with you. Alright, I think I've walked on enough eggshells. Let's get into the actual video. Out of the 3 Pokemon I mentioned, Klink is both the least egregious and the least talked about. That's not to say Klink doesn't have its fans, though. In April 2024, top Rivals of Aether player Marlon posted a tweet insulting the Klink line. A lot of Klink fans quote-tweeted this post, and some even allegedly sent death threats. Because of course, that's a reasonable response to someone saying your favorite Pokemon is not peak. Obviously, this isn't a reflection on Klink fans as a whole, just Twitter users. Follow me on Blue Sky, by the way. Most of the quote tweets weren't toxic, just people posting examples of Pokemon they think are bad, saying, how can you call Klinklang bad when these Pokemon exist? Which, isn't much of an argument. 2 things can be bad at the same time. You not liking Dugtrio doesn't make Klinklang any better. There was one reply I saw which presented an actual argument, and admittedly it is an interesting point. The Klink line's progression helped to demonstrate the newly animated sprites of Gen 5. Seeing Klink grow into Klang and then into Klinklang, all while seeing the original Klink in each design, showed players the strengths of animated sprites. I agree with this point. The Klink line does do a good job of taking advantage of the new sprites. However, I don't think this point makes the Klink line well designed. Sure, as it stands, these Pokemon show off the animated sprites, but this was not the only way to show off this concept. They could have had the line change more dramatically when it evolved while still keeping the first 2 forms present in the final design. This, in my opinion, is the main issue with the Klink family. In my experience, fans are willing to excuse a simple, even boring, unevolved Pokemon if it turns into something cool. Like, I have a soft spot for Trubbish. He's my guy, but come on. He's a mushroom with feet and a frowny face. He's just a green Goomba. But then Breloom goes way bigger, turning into this boxing kangaroo dinosaur hybrid, and that complexity retroactively makes Trubbish more interesting. Its spotted pattern resembles the pattern seen on dinosaur eggs both in Pokemon and for characters like Yoshi, so now dinosaur egg can be inferred as part of Trubbish's design. If Breloom had just been a bigger, meaner Trubbish, I don't think people would like these designs nearly as much. And yet, that's basically what happened to Klink. I want to compare the Klink line to the Magnemite line, as many have done already. Both start with a small metal object, and when they evolve, they just bring more of these objects in. The Magnemite's magnetism gets them stuck together, and the Klinks build on each other like a real gear system. It's cute, it works, but there is something lackluster about this. Like, Magneton and Klang are just the first form with more tacked on, and evolution is meant to evolve the concept. Sure, being made of inorganic metal limits this, but most rock and even steel types undergo some change when they evolve. These 2 are the outliers. And Doublade, I guess.
I gotta tell you, this is pretty terrific. Yeah.
Magneton manages to turn it around 3 generations later, as Magnezone is noticeably different. It's converted its 3 Magnemite into a flying saucer design, with its middle eye becoming huge and red, creating this ominous vibe like it's going to lock onto you and start firing. Meanwhile, Klinklang is just Klang with a hula hoop. That's not much of an exaggeration. The Pokédex does specify that the new spiked gear is not a living creature like the other 2 are. I get that gear systems build upon themselves, that's the beauty of them, but wouldn't it have been cool to see what the gears are building towards? Like, sure, you have stages 1 and 2 is just the gears getting more complicated after they evolve, but then the 3rd stage could have put those gears to work, powering a pair of clock hands or something. In canon, the way it works is the gear spinning charges the red gem, letting it build up energy, which it then fires through the spiked hoop. This isn't reflected in its in-game attack animations, it just fires from the gem, but that's not important. It's also a physical attacker, despite the lore saying it fires energy like a special attacker, but again, not important. I guess it just grinds my gears. Anyway, the spinning gears charge a weapon, but why is this weapon implied through the gem and the spiky gear instead of just giving Klink an actual weapon? We didn't even make it into the double digits in the National Pokédex before we got literal cannons on a turtle. Why doesn't Klink have some sort of laser blaster on here? You could have even kept Klang on the front spinning the other gears, showing the progression throughout the stages. But now it would feel like the design actually progressed somewhere. When I see Klink, my brain does not register this as a weapon. It just sees a collection of gears. Gears don't turn for the sake of turning, their motion moves other objects. Sure, a Pokemon themed around a perpetual motion machine sounds interesting on paper, but the gears are so central to the design that this gets lost, and the weapon it uses is so vague it honestly does not read any different from how normal Pokemon attack. This is not at all helped by the series' approach to attack animations. Oh, Klink fires its thunderbolts from the spiked gear? Well, it looks just like my Jolteon firing thunderbolts from its head. Where's its gear? I don't know. I think of it like this. If Magnezone hadn't been a flying saucer, and instead had been 5 Magnemites stuck together, would people have liked this design? I sincerely doubt it. Sure, it makes sense for a magnet-themed evolution, but this is all you could think of for where to take this idea? Klink feels like this hypothetical Magnezone. Sure, it makes sense, but it's boring. There were so many things they could have done with a gear Pokemon, even if they wanted to keep all the previous forms incorporated into the design, but they gave us the first thing anyone would have thought of. That really is the main reason I think this line is poorly designed. If it had any prominent theme other than gears, it could have worked. With all that said, I can see why Klink fans like it. There's no other Pokemon which plays into this specific flavor of autism. Y'all should have specced into the dinosaur brand of autism. I am thriving in this series. Gear systems and the mechanics behind them are fascinating, and I get how Klink may scratch that itch for you, especially since you see the system grow as it evolves. I'm just saying, as a gear apathist, I feel like the line is missing a sense of completion, which is why I am so down on it. So that's my take on the Klink line. Like I mentioned earlier, Klink is the least bad of these three, so I don't have as much to say about it. Let's move on to the next line. Alright, I'm going to level with you. I know I saved Trubbish for last, but Vanillite is my least favorite of the three. I think it's the most emblematic of the issues shared between these designs, and the idea behind it is the least interesting. It is an icicle, which resembles an ice cream cone. I've seen Vanillite fans mention this as though we're supposed to appreciate that it's not actually ice cream, but personally, my issue is never what the cone was actually made of. In fact, I would have liked a Pokemon literally made of ice cream if they had done something interesting with it, like fellow food Pokemon Appleton and Fido. I dislike the idea of the icicle ice cream because the two overlap so much visually. I mean, look at Vanillite. If we accept that this is an icicle and not an actual ice cream cone, and you were tasked with making a separate Pokemon, which literally is just an ice cream cone, how would it differ from this design? What could you do to make it more ice cream cone, less icicle? Maybe the cone would be a different color, but that's it. The other problem is they did nothing to emphasize the icicle in this design. I mean, imagine I'm the director of Pokemon Gold and Silver, and you bring me your finalized design for Donphan. I say, yes, I love the mixture of elephant and tire features, very nice. Except, he's a bit squat right now, let's make those legs a bit longer. And those tusks, they need to be bigger, bigger is better. And the ears a bit wider, let's just remove that tread from his back. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. You tell me, sir, that just looks like a regular elephant. And I say, no, it's still a tire. See that dark leathery skin? It's actually rubber, like a tire. You say, sir, that's not very different from a normal elephant's skin. You are promptly fired for being a dumb, stupid idiot. My point is, if they wanted this to be an icicle, they needed to convey that more clearly in its design. Other food designs do this well. Alchemy is made of whipped cream, but shapes it like a woman in a dress. Doshbun is a baguette, but also a dog. Applin and its evolutions are all awesome dragon-apple hybrids. Dhelmise is the king of this type of design. The anchor is a literal anchor, but the Pokemon is not the anchor. It's a sentient clump of seaweed, and it latches onto the anchor and uses it to give it some much-needed heft and weight. It's a genuinely effective bait and switch, the reason why makes sense, chef's kiss. The problem the Vanillite line has is when the two objects you're trying to combine are so visually similar, there's not much you can do to prevent one from overshadowing the other. This really hinders any potential the Vanillite line had, and unfortunately leaves it looking more like an ice cream mascot than a Pokémon. It doesn't even do the one thing icicles are known to do, hang from the ceiling. I could see Vanillish dropping from the ceiling to ambush players like we see other Pokémon do in X and Y. This wouldn't suddenly make the design good, but it needs something to sell the supposed combination of ideas. So I dislike the idea behind Vanillite, but this is only half the argument I see on behalf of these Pokémon. The other half relates to their lore in the games. Let's explore that next. One argument I've seen repeatedly is that in the Pokémon universe, the Vanillite line has existed since the Ice Age, meaning they predate ice cream cones, not to mention humanity as a whole. This means that ice cream cones, and especially the Castelia cone, were inspired by these Pokémon, rather than these Pokémon being ice cream cones brought to life or something along those lines. This makes the design more interesting, doesn't it? Well, no, not really. Sure, in-universe, these Pokémon predate the ice cream cone, but these Pokémon were not designed in-universe, they were designed in our universe, by a real person, James Turner. Side note, Turner has made some banger Pokémon designs, I just don't like this line specifically. He's a very talented artist, I just don't want me mentioning him to sound like I'm calling him out in any way. He's very good at what he does. Back to Vanillite, Turner and the rest of the designers drew upon their real-world knowledge while making these Pokémon, including the knowledge of what an ice cream cone is. And, more importantly, we the player exist in the real world where ice cream cones exist. Otherwise, this design doesn't mean anything, and its name is nonsensical. Vanilla is a flower. What does this ball of ice have to do with that? Now, all character design plays into the audience's existing knowledge and understanding. It's just more efficient at setting up what your design is and what it represents. But Vanillite's design playing so far into our idea of an ice cream cone prevents it from building an identity of its own. Most people look at it and just see a cartoon ice cream cone. The thing is, Pokémon has done something similar before, where a Pokémon based on a man-made object predates mankind in universe. Unknown debuted with 26 different forms in the second generation of Pokémon, each representing a letter of the alphabet, with 2 more forms representing the question and exclamation marks released in the next generation. Many of their Pokédex entries talk about their similarity to ancient writing and the mystery of which came first. Now, on the surface, Unknown seems like it should share many of the same issues Vanillite faces. It closely resembles the actual object it's based on. Shouldn't that hinder Unknown's ability to define itself? Admittedly, closely is a bit of an exaggeration. Sure, some forms are unmistakably based on the alphabet, but some only make sense once you know that's what they're going for, and others barely parse even after you know what they're supposed to be. But, more importantly, I think the biggest thing which sells Unknown is just that its concept is more intriguing. While people don't encounter sentient ice cream cones in their day-to-day lives, most have seen a regular ice cream cone. Hell, most have probably held one. It's a very mundane object. But despite how prevalent the alphabet is in our day-to-day lives, none of us have ever held a letter. We don't know what the letter K would feel like, smell like, or taste like. The alphabet only exists as a concept in our minds. It has no form. Giving it form and having it jump out at players makes it mysterious. Just what the hell is this thing? The much simpler characterization also lends itself to this. Vanillite has a personable face. You can read the emotions on it, whether it's the default happy smile or a sad frown when it faints. But Unknown just has one eye. Enough to signal to us that this thing is alive, but not enough to tell us what it's thinking. Is Unknown happy? Sad? Curious? Aggressive? There's no way to tell, other than the eyelid coming down when it attacks or faints. This makes Unknown way more interesting. It's an enigma, and we know as little about it now as when this little freak debuted 20 years ago. Obviously, Vanillite isn't going for this kind of intriguing, mysterious design, but then this tidbit about it existing since the Ice Age means nothing to me. Why do I care when Vanillite started roaming the planet if there's no intrigue to this information? Sure, it can just be a fun piece of trivia, that's not a problem, but that doesn't make the design more interesting, despite what some fans seem to believe. It's like hearing, Pyroar's breath is hotter than the sun. Doesn't that make it so much cooler? No one cares about that, save for Pyroar fans and those people who make videos of Pokemon defying the laws of physics. With all those issues outlined, why do people like this design? Well, there is one simple fact I haven't addressed. Vanillite is a cutie patootie. I mean, I called him an ice cream mascot before, but that doesn't make him ugly. Mascots are supposed to be endearing. He's got this massive head, which makes the design cuter, and that big happy grin gives him a good vibe. I have no problem believing that someone would see this design for the first time, think it was adorable, and grow attached to it. And while I feel the evolutions look too similar, if you're a fan of Vanillite, I'm sure you're glad the evolved forms keep the parts you found charming. Look, you even get 2 of them by the end. That's nice. There's no denying that Vanillite has some charm, and while I feel his design is lacking, I can see what draws people to him. And though I think most of his charm comes from traits already found in Ice Cream, I can concede that it takes artistic talent to recognize these traits and play them up in your Pokemon design. If we slap Vanillite's face on a stalk of asparagus, it wouldn't be half as endearing as the real thing. While I still don't like this Pokemon, I can see why some people would. With that, it's time to move on to the last of these 3 lambasted object Pokemon, Trubbish. Out of the trio, Trubbish is definitely the one with the most vocal defenders. This makes sense. It was basically made the face of everything wrong with Gen 5 back in the day, so a lot of fans are willing to jump to its defense. It's also the closest of these 3 designs to working, though ultimately it too falls flat. Let's start by looking at how Garbodor changes when it evolves. Compared to the last 2 lines, it seems like it's on the right track here. Just look at that silhouette, it's so different from Trubbish. But while it doesn't look as similar to Trubbish as the previous final forms look to their base forms, this design still suffers from a lack of change between stages. When you get down to it, both of these Pokemon are living trash. I know some fans claim there are other elements at play here, I'll get to those later, but even assuming there is some second element here, it would apply to both stages. They aren't added to Garbodor after being absent from Trubbish. So when Trubbish evolves, the idea, or ideas, behind it don't change, it just gets bigger. Even though Garbodor undergoes this big visual change, it's just more Trubbish. It's kind of like that hypothetical Breloom I brought up earlier, which is just a bigger Shroomish. I feel that Trubbish needed to change more when it evolved, given its simple design. Now, if you believe there is more to Trubbish and Garbodor than sentient garbage, you might disagree with that analysis. There are all kinds of Pokemon which start out as a blend of concepts in the first stage and just take the following stages to beef them up a bit. Why should Trubbish be different? I think that's a fair counter-argument, which is why I want to dive into the various theories I've seen for what themes are present in the Trubbish line, and why I don't think they're actually there. There's quite a few of these, so let's just start with the most common one. When looking at Garbodor, there's a lot that might catch your attention, from those long spindly arms, those gnashing teeth, and, the fact that it's a walking landfill. But you'll also notice that it has ears on the top of its head. Some fans have interpreted this as a reference to dust bunnies, as in Japanese the word for dust is synonymous with the word for trash. They argue Garbodor is based on a pun. He is a dustbin bunny. I like the idea behind this theory, but honestly, I don't know how you can look at this design and see a rabbit. Sure, it has fluffy ears, but every other part of its design is actively fighting against that interpretation. Bunnies are known for jumping and having powerful hind legs. Garbodor walks around on hockey pucks. Bunnies are known for their bucked teeth and eating plants. Garbodor's teeth look like they crack bones open from marrow. Bunnies burrow underground. I can't bury my Garbodor without the ECCC breathing down my back. And I don't know what kind of rabbit has a long tendril arm it uses to lock its target in place and douse them with toxic gas, but Garbodor has that base covered. And look, a bunny Pokemon does not have to be exactly like a real-world bunny. That's where the fantasy element of Pokemon comes in. But every part of Garbodor's design is the opposite of what you'd expect from a rabbit design, save for those ears which, frankly, aren't all that rabbit-like to begin with. Actual pun designs, like the previously mentioned Doshbun and Applin, make both sides of the pun apparent in that design. Trubbish does not. I think a rabbit made of trash could have made an excellent Pokemon design, but this analysis does not fit Trubbish and Garbodor. A similar theory says that Trubbish is supposed to be a cat. This largely stems from this piece of promotional artwork with a bunch of cat Pokemon. It included Trubbish among the cats, ergo Trubbish is a cat, right? Again, no. Sure, this one has some more merit, being officially implied by the Pokemon Company itself, but like with the rabbit theory, nothing else ties into this idea. Cats also don't have stubby hind legs or spindly arms, and the ears look nothing like cat ears. The sharp teeth make more sense now, but their gaping maw doesn't. And sure, it lives in the same kinds of spots you would see an alley cat, high-density urban areas, specifically the parts of the city where most people don't go. But you know what else you can find there? Trash. That's where people keep their trash. That's why no one goes there, and therefore why alley cats live there. It's the same problem we saw with Vanillite. If the idea behind Trubbish was to combine trash and an alley cat, all of the alley cat features present are also trash features, so it does not read as cat-like. And just like the rabbit theory, an alley cat made of garbage would have been a really fun design. There are so many changes they could have done to make these Pokemon look like cats, and the fact they didn't do any of them indicates they were never designed to be cats. Hell, just look at the names. In English and Japanese, these names only have to do with garbage. Trash rubbish, garbage odor, ripped bag, take out trash. If this were a cat or a rabbit, shouldn't the name reflect that instead of banging on about trash? Those are two of the most common arguments from Trubbish fans, but they're far from the only ones. Let's stop looking at the natural world and get a little supernatural. For the 3 people watching a Pokemon video and don't know what a yokai is, they're creatures from Japanese folklore. Basically, if an object is neglected or unused for too long, it gains a spirit and becomes alive. This is different from something like a poltergeist. Instead of being possessed by a random ghost, the object inherits its own soul over time. And some Trubbish fans say it's supposed to be a yokai. The garbage is discarded and neglected, leading to it coming to life. Again, this is a really cool idea which just does not apply to Trubbish as it stands. From the very beginning, Trubbish's Pokédex entries have stated it came to life from a chemical reaction between industrial waste and garbage bags. This completely contradicts the idea of it being a yokai. It didn't gain a soul from being neglected, it just came to life from a random chemical reaction. If this trash bag had been lovingly cared for by some hoarder who can't throw away their garbage, it still would have turned into Trubbish. But more damning than his Pokédex entries is just the fact that, again, nothing about Trubbish or Garbodor indicates that they're yokai. It's like the question I posed earlier for Vanillite. If we assume Trubbish is a yokai, and we want to make a different Pokemon which literally is just a trash bag, how would it differ from Trubbish? Which features could you alter or remove to make Trubbish less yokai, more trash bag? It's not a ghost type, and its lore has nothing to do with neglect or being abandoned. It's just a creature made of garbage. The other way to read this interpretation is that while Trubbish is not literally a yokai, it is conceptually similar to a yokai, and that's what makes it interesting. It is a man-made object which came to life because of its connection to humanity. It's yokai adjacent. Problem is, this reasoning is so broad, it could apply to literally any object Pokemon. Comfey is a yokai. Meltan is a yokai. Fucking Carkol is a yokai now. The definition has been expanded so far that it's rendered basically meaningless. You could slap 2 Ys on any man-made object and call it a yokai at that point. That doesn't make it a good design. Not to mention, we've seen an explicit yokai Pokemon before. Banette is an abandoned doll which seeks to hunt down the child who threw it away. That's so much better as a yokai design. Not only is it ghost type to reflect its supernatural origins, but its lore is all about being neglected and coming to life to exact revenge. Meanwhile, Trubbish only follows you around if you litter. Not to get revenge, just because it eats garbage. It's as much of a yokai as a duck following an old lady who feeds it breadcrumbs. 3 times now, fans have come up with potential hidden themes in Trubbish which simply aren't there. For the final theme I want to investigate, let's take a look at what the creators had in mind when making Trubbish. This theory comes from an interview in the January 2011 edition of Nintendo Dream with 3 of Pokemon's designers, Ken Sugimori, Takao Uno, and Yusuke Omura. All 3 of them have been hugely influential in the series. Uno designed fan favorites like Garchomp and Braviary, Umura designed Piplup, Oshawott, and Froakie, and you can't go 2 seconds in Kanto without finding one of Sugimori's designs. You also couldn't go 3 cards without finding him in the trading card game back in the day. Anyway, this interview focused on the origins of some of Unova's Pokemon, including our trashy boys. Sugimori said they wanted a Pokemon based on pollution, since they would be making Castelia City a large metropolis. Uno said they immediately went with trash as a type of everyday pollution, and they had the idea of a creature disguising itself as garbage. Sugimori added that it's common to get startled from a plastic bag blowing around at night, so this design made sense. It's very interesting to see the thought process behind these Pokemon, and I recommend you read some of the other entries here too. I've linked Dr. Lava's translation in the description. However, it seems this idea of a creature using trash to disguise itself did not stick to these designs. There's no mention of it in any of their Pokédex entries, and of course, we can already see the Pokémon inside the bag. We know there's nothing hidden inside, the garbage is already leaking out of them. I guess you could interpret it as the Pokémon isn't actually made of trash, it's just made of something visually similar to trash, which we see leaking out of the bag, but it still stinks, it's still toxic, it still wraps itself in trash bags and lives in garbage bins. It's not like we have a real hard definition on what trash is. It doesn't have to literally be things people throw away. So if it looks like garbage, smells like garbage, and is found everywhere garbage is found, I feel comfortable saying this is just garbage. I don't think it can be anything else. And I don't think we're supposed to read Trubbish and Garbodor this way. It's just what inspired their design. Pokemon change all the time before release, like Frillish being given its ghost typing, and Stunfisk being changed from part water to part ground. This baggy disguise idea did seem to stick around for Mimikyu though, which honestly feels like the one Pokemon literally everyone likes. It's cute, it's creepy, it'll snuggle you to death, it's great. And it's kind of funny how the origin of one of the series' least popular Pokemon was later reused for one of its most popular. Makes you think. I've seen a lot of people who just love the fact that there is a trash-based Pokemon. It's a unique concept, it fits the urban environment, and it completes the land, sea, sky pollution trio started by Muck and Weezing back in Gen 1. I still think they could have taken this idea further, but I also concede that fans can be happy they got anything at all. As for the actual design, like Vanillite, there is something kinda cute about it. It's short, round, and has big dopey eyes. It's like a lumpy Kirby who smells bad. The vacant expression on both their faces does also give them a strong personality, which players can latch onto. They look earnest. They have no idea what's going on or why they're battling this trainer, but by God they're going to give it their all. Garbodor even retains a lot of the roundness and earnestness when it evolves. I've seen people compare it to Totoro, which, yeah, I can kind of see the resemblance. Like with Vanillite, it takes skill to recognize the cute attributes in something and play them up. This is especially the case here, since garbage is inherently a thing most people think is gross, and they had to overcome that in this design. I just think they could have been cute lumps of garbage in addition to something else. I've provided my reasons for why I think Klink, Vanillite, and Trubbish do not work as Pokemon designs. To be clear, they're far from the only Pokemon which have these issues. Like I said at the beginning, I like Pyroar, but it lacks anything to make it more than just a lion. These three, and especially Trubbish, are just the ones that I've noticed get the most pushback to critique, and I wanted to talk about why I disagree with this pushback. I feel like I've made this clear throughout the video, but this is not a problem with object Pokemon as a category. I mean, I made comparisons to many of them throughout the video, pointing out how they do something one of these three do not. It should be clear I at least think these designs are competent, if not outright excellent. Maybe some are less object than some fans want, but regardless, it shows that there are many ways to make these concepts work, and I just feel like these three fall short of the standard set by the other designs. Now, if you're a fan of one of these designs and you made it to the end of the video, thank you. Sincerely. Like I said at the beginning, I didn't make this video to insult you or convince you not to like what you like, and I appreciate that you were willing to hear me out to the end. The whole appeal of Pokemon is picking your team and having your favorites regardless of what other people think, and as much as that Karen quote gets memed on, I still think it's important to stick to your favorites regardless of what the fanbase tells you is cringe or whatever. I hope we can go our separate ways now that the video's over, you enjoying your little trash bag, and me enjoying my roast beast. That'll do it for this video. It's fun to be a hater, but I'm going to try not to make a habit of it. I'll make a more positive video soon so I'm not constantly bashing this series. Believe it or not, I really do like Pokemon, despite all its flaws. Also, check out my girlfriend's channel, Parker Hall Writing. She recently uploaded a video dissecting A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, The Ballad of Lucy Gray, and the role ballads play in the Hunger Games series as a whole. She's currently working on a video for Sunrise on the Reaping, so if you're a Hunger Games fan, make sure to check them out. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video, or if you're just curious about what other baffling takes I might have. Thank you for sticking to the end. I'll catch you next time.
Let's go, girls.